We now live in the Dragon Ball age, where the first Super Saiyan transformation in Dragon Ball Z is referred to as the classic, the original. One huge nostalgia trip, and rightfully so, but in terms of power these days, meh. You can kiss the original Super Saiyan form goodbye in terms of relevance in the Dragon Ball Super manga, movies, promotional anime, Super Dragon Ball Heroes, you name it. If we're lucky, they may just make Super Saiyan 2 put up a decent warm-up round, followed by smacking that user into the dirt in order to get serious. That's where we are in terms of the power of the original Super Saiyan, or Super Saiyan 1. But when we look back at the transformation, let's use Goku as a prime example on Namek. That Super Saiyan form was so incredibly ridiculous, and I don't think many fans realize how broken it actually is by concept, and how much it literally forced everyone who wasn't a Super Saiyan to grow at an accelerated rate in accordance with the plot. Think about it like this. Before Raditz arrived, fighters were gaining hundreds of battle power throughout the course of their 20 plus years life. In between Raditz and mid-Namek, fighters were gaining thousands every few days. But when Super Saiyan came into the equation, characters literally started to gain millions of battle power within a few years, even more if you were a Saiyan. Now that pattern should tell you something. Of course, levels of power for Goku, as an example, were getting way higher from point A to point B than they ever did before. And that happened before Super Saiyan, but when Super Saiyan came into it, it turbocharged these gains, where not even a million Gokus pre-Raditz, all added together, could even fathom one Super Saiyan in the Android saga, in terms of growth. So Super Saiyan is broken in that sense, in the way of how it turbocharged the power growth rate for everyone in Dragon Ball Z at the time. But how is Super Saiyan broken as a transformation? Well, I'm going to talk about the 50 times multiplier, officially stated in guides, and officially demonstrated during the official power levels between Goku and Frieza. And you could argue much more during the Cell Saga with the different grades, but for anyone who thinks power levels don't count, or multipliers of techniques and forms, they do for two major arcs of Dragon Ball Z. They were the theme and foundation for gauging fighters. Relevant? 100%. But a 50 times multiplier, why is this such a big deal? Well, first of all, you may not have noticed how broken Super Saiyan was against Frieza, because Goku in his base form struggled so much that Super Saiyan essentially closed the gap, a gap where Goku was already at a disadvantage, but finally closed it and made his own gap against Frieza's then inferior power throughout the fight. Now, because that was such an intense battle, back and forth for the most of it, you would miss why the Super Saiyan form, by concept, is extremely broken. By how much it increases a base power. Think of it like this. Imagine a base form Goku and Frieza were equal in battle, and then imagine Goku turns Super Saiyan getting that 50 times power amp. Do you see how ridiculous that is? Now 50 times, how do you measure that in terms of dominance? Well, let me show you what just 2 times stronger than someone can do. Throughout the Saiyan and Namek arcs, it was demonstrated that fighters who were around 1.25 times stronger could begin overwhelming an opponent, where 1.5 to 1.75 times meant they could comfortably dominate and would only lose by some accident or not concentrating, but 2 times, just 2 times stronger passively, power versus power, that meant fighters could tank attacks unharmed. Look at second form Frieza when he took Vegeta's blast to his back. His guard was down, he wasn't paying attention to Vegeta, but he was so strong in raw power, over 2 times stronger than Vegeta, that it negated Vegeta's energy blast. And energy blasts have proven to multiply power from 1.5 times to 2 to 3 depending on if it's a special attack. Kamehameha is 2.2 times. And in the Daizenshu, it also states that by emitting twice the ki or energy as the opponent, it negates the attack. So yes, 2 times stronger pretty much guarantees you victory. But then we bring in Super Saiyan, good old classic Super Saiyan 1. Imagine you're having a good fight against someone, it's going back and forth, you know, like Tien versus Trunks in the BoJack movie. Because we all know the golden rule, when an Earthling pushes a Saiyan to go Super Saiyan, they've already won. But something similar. You feel like you've got a chance. Then your opponent turns Super Saiyan. Oh dear, your attacks are bouncing off their skin. You cannot even see them move anymore. Their power didn't multiply by 2 times, rendering you obsolete entirely. It didn't multiply by 5, or 10 times, or 20 times, or 30 times, or 40 times. It multiplied their power by 50 times, which is ridiculous. It's unnecessary as a concept, especially if the original battle and base forms were equal. Even if you were stronger than the Saiyan's base form by 10 times, Super Saiyan will obliterate you and eventually be 5 times stronger than you. But there's a reason why Super Saiyan had to be that ridiculous. And what seems unnecessary, it actually became extremely necessary due to the writing and power jumps pushing Toriyama into a corner. But if these guys in base form were ever level with a villain, amping their power by a further 50 times is chaotic, and the equivalent of you walking outside trying to stop a bus from moving with your bare hands. And one of the most prime examples in Dragon Ball Z where you can truly see the devastating power of a Super Saiyan amp after a somewhat closer fight is in the anime during Vegito vs Majin Buu. You could say they were relatively in the same ballpark initially, but when Vegito went Super Saiyan, the 50 times power jump was overkill for anything Buu had, to the point Super Vegito was by far the strongest level of power in Dragon Ball Z, thanks to fusion, but definitely thanks to that Super Saiyan amp afterwards. And he wasn't even trying. He could have taken on 20 Majin Buus and stand victorious. So that's how deadly the Super Saiyan amp actually is. Was 50 times a bit of an overkill when it was being created? Well, Akira Toriyama seems to think so, but at the same time, it's crystal clear he backed himself into a corner with just how strong everyone were getting through the plot, that a 50 times increase was the only appropriate value for Super Saiyan to have to make that difference and come across as a shock factor of power. He says it was considered that his strength would increase 50-fold, but this was an exaggeration. Toriyama actually felt it was a 10 times increase from Goku's power up until that point. Now, first of all, this can be looked at in 2 ways. Some see this as 10 times the last big level of power Goku had, which was theoretically a Kaioken times 20. Then times 10 that level. So a power level of 60 million becomes 600 million for Super Saiyan, which ends up being 4 times stronger than the 150 million for Super Saiyan, actually making this way Super Saiyan being 200 times the base form. But you could make sense of that in verse as to why Goku was 150 million against Frieza and not 600 million, was because just before the transformation, Goku was nearly on life support after the Spirit Bomb and exhausting his power with the Kaioken times 20. Super Saiyan is a multiplier of whatever base form is there. His base power at that time would not have been at full power, perhaps even less than a quarter, which makes sense why Super Saiyan stacked on top of a quarter base power equaled 150 million. Plus he went unconscious the moment he left Namek in the pod. He was exhausted, so a fresh Goku could have been 600 million in Toriyama's eyes that way, and if you look at Goku vs Frieza using battle logistics and conditioning. But the other way we can view this times 10 Goku's power for Super Saiyan is if we're talking about the base form increase. Then that means Super Saiyan was going to be the level of a Kaioken times 10, where when comparing it to Frieza's power growths and his planned 100% power, a 10 times Super Saiyan multiplier would have never made the cut. So that's probably one big realization for Toriyama at that moment, where he realized, wow, okay, everyone got strong very quickly, Super Saiyan should actually be way more. And there lies the problem of not just how Super Saiyan became broken, but why. Because this is where we talk about the damn Kaioken for a second. Super Saiyan is not just ridiculous because it's Super Saiyan, it had to be ridiculous because of what happened before it. The damn Kaioken. Now, in my opinion, as cool as the Kaioken is, especially in the early days, it's the one technique, the one concept that broke Dragon Ball almost as much as Super Saiyan, but enough to make Super Saiyan necessary in terms of its power jump. Super Saiyan was a necessity to keep up with all the crazy power jumps, to make it valuable, but the later amps to Kaioken, that being times 10 and 20, were inessential and what really set up for Dragon Ball Z being broken beyond repair. You see, with the Kaioken times 3 and 4, that felt reasonable, like exceeding a limit that your body is not meant to be doing, essentially breaking your limits 3 times in one technique. It doesn't even seem believable, but okay, I suppose we could stomach times 3 times 4, because it's Goku. But there were consequences, the times 4 being death imminent in order to protect Earth. That's all good, times 4 is broken as hell, but it's not too broken for Goku, because the problem comes when everyone on Namek, particularly Frieza, was written to be way too damn strong, even in his first few forms, where that even encouraged Piccolo to get insanely stronger after a week with King Kai. And Frieza was so strong it wouldn't even make sense to have Goku just use Kaioken times 3 and 4 and decide to just keep increasing Goku's base power to 30 plus million. No. Frieza's deadly ridiculous power led to the Kaioken times 10 and 20 being a necessity, and the stupid Kaioken amps led to the Super Saiyan multiplier of times 50 being a necessity. The 1% power thing for Frieza, how strong he got, Super Saiyan had to be BS in terms of multiplying, that these two fighters then left everything known to Dragon Ball power in the dust. Where by the time the Android saga came about, all the way up to Dragon Ball Super, everyone just had to be stronger just for the plot. Like, way stronger. Stronger than they ever logically got in the past, even when they went through the hardest training back then, like for the Saiyans. But even in Dragon Ball Z, even the Earthlings started to gain thousands and millions of battle power just to keep up somewhat, all because of concepts like Kaioken, Frieza, Super Saiyan, all forced Dragon Ball power scaling to go into overdrive, where you only ever needed to be 2 times stronger to completely blitz an opponent. In my opinion, Dragon Ball power scaling could have been so much closer to each other without all these crazy power amps. And in terms of the Uzaru, you may be thinking, well, how can the Kaioken times 10 be considered ridiculous and begin to break Dragon Ball power when the Uzaru is a 10 times multiplier, where Super Saiyan has to be more than an Uzaru? And yes, I consider that too. Uzaru being 10 times is still a massive deal. 10 times is friggin' huge and is broken in itself in terms of battle logistics. But the difference between the Kaioken and Uzaru is that the Kaioken is a technique that's actually not meant to be used. It's a technique that makes your base form do things outside of what it should be able to do, hence the damage on Goku's body. And that should have stayed. Those consequences. You see, by concept, the Kaioken should have never been able to be mastered later down the line, especially in Dragon Ball Super, and never put further numbers on top of the times 4. The whole, well, Goku just trains harder to handle it excuse is terrible when you think about it, because when Goku gets stronger, his base gets stronger. It's always been that way. No matter which max base power you activate Kaioken on top of, whether it's 8,000 on Earth or 90,000 on Namek, the Kaioken is pushing Goku outside of that max base range that he works so hard to achieve, to levels he shouldn't actually be able to reach outside of that base, where that should result in serious damage. A Kaioken times 4 on Namek Goku's base form should wield the same consequences as it did on a smaller base form on Earth. It's the same sort of increase to what was the max base potential at the time. Now when it comes to the Uzaru, here's the difference. It's a metamorphosis into another form altogether. The Kaioken is not a transformation, but an amp on the base form. The Uzaru actually felt like it needed to be 10 times based on the sheer size of it and the way it performed. It was a giant monster that needed a specific requirement to transform. It's meant to have an overloaded power at the price of its size and loss of rationale depending on who is the Saiyan and the weakness of the tail. There's a reasonable trade-off there for that 10 times increase. And it's their actual Saiyan potential. Kaioken is not the user's potential, but essentially an adrenaline shot with come-down effects. Hell, Uzaru Vegeta wasn't even at full power when he transformed, but point being, 10 times for something as huge and impactful as an Uzaru, the then considered to be the best Saiyan transformation, 10 times in raw power is justified because it looks like something that the Power Rangers fight in their Megazord. It was meant to be the Saiyan's true power at the time, and was written as a planet-conquering form when on mission, so if anything, Super Saiyan, when that came into the equation, do I feel there should have been a larger multiplier than 10 on it? Absolutely. Would 20 times have been reasonable? And I would say yes, but only if Frieza was written to be with less power, which would have been fine. The massive height on Frieza's power just meant everyone else, specifically Goku, just needed that plot power up to reach it. He was written too strong, which required the 50 times, but Toriyama could have easily kept the Kaioken to times 4 at absolute maximum with consequences still attached. Uzaru at times 10, but then is scrapped because of the Saiyan tail situation, but Super Saiyan at 20 times, so it's twice the Great Ape, could still dominate the Great Ape, but you retain your rationale, and you're in a nice compact body, and can still move super fast, thus keeping all the new transformations and power-ups later on as low as possible in terms of the power creeps. But let's be honest, it was only going to hold back the ever-growing power creeps, not stop them. As the T-800 said, Judgment Day is inevitable, you can only postpone it. Now, I just want to give a quick mention to the Lord Slug movie and the Kaioken times 100. You see, this movie production began in September-October of 1990, released in March 1991, and the Super Saiyan Goku transformation for the manga came out a week after that. So essentially, before the Super Saiyan multiplier ever came to fruition, the movies already busted the Kaioken by double of what Super Saiyan was meant to be later on. And I know it's a standalone movie, but come on, 100 times Kaioken, we don't forget power-ups like that in Dragon Ball, brother. And let's not forget when Goku uses Super Saiyan and then a Kamehameha on top. Do you know how much that amplifies raw power? 50 times for Super Saiyan, then 2.2 for the Kamehameha. Meaning the beam is 110 times stronger than your previously equaled base forms. And if we went with the previous 200 times multiplier for Super Saiyan that we discussed, or even how strong you think grade 4 is, we're talking up to 500 times stronger if Goku decides to randomly use a Super Saiyan Kamehameha in battle. When it gets to that point, where 2 times would have been just enough, I then ask myself, what is the point anymore? This is why I always respect characters who remain in base form and progress the story without spamming transformations. I love how Dragon Ball GT utilized base form Goku as the main appearance and level of Goku to manage the problems, and Super Saiyan was only used for super serious circumstances, not the necessity. And I think that's where Dragon Ball Z was different, and especially Dragon Ball Super, in that the enemies are too damn strong for base forms that Super Saiyan had to be activated at minimum to deal with the threats. And this leads us to modern Dragon Ball, Super Saiyan God's Ultra Instinct. I mean, what did we expect after Namek? That everything was going to go back to normal and fighting would be grounded? Far more closer in terms of power levels? Of course not. It was impossible to do so, and especially doing it and making sense of it. Dragon Ball was destined to be broken forever, and we just have to accept whatever is in the plot, sense or no sense, it's just happening that way. Because they tried to ground this power jumping nonsense using Master Roshi vs Jiren, when Roshi was mocking battle power, or Toyotaro or Toriyama, through the dialogue of Roshi I should say. Where Goku failed with his Kaioken Blue Surge, Roshi went back to mind, body and spirit, martial arts training, and could even dodge Jiren for a moment. But Toyotaro, Toriyama, you can mock battle power all you want, you can try and make power irrelevant all you want, and insist on going back to basics, but it will never work. Because forever and a day, power has always been the key to winning the big fights in Dragon Ball, especially Dragon Ball Z. You could learn 10,000 styles and know a million techniques in Dragon Ball Z, but if your power wasn't as strong as the big enemy, it doesn't matter, you aren't winning. And even in Dragon Ball GT and Super. And that's why the Roshi vs Jiren moment was just unbelievable to me. I didn't buy it at all, despite efforts to make raw power irrelevant, or not as important in fighting, when it's actually been the driving force for Dragon Ball since, well, decades. Bottom line, Super Saiyan has always been ridiculously overpowered as a concept, and I think a lot of fans really overlook just how busted it is because of the plot and how it became a necessity to fight the next big villain power, when ultimately it makes the classic base forms obsolete. Super Saiyan destroyed base forms in Dragon Ball Z, it destroyed power scaling, and came to be because of the Kaioken and Frieza beforehand, requiring Super Saiyan and everything after it in terms of transformations to be so damn broken. Because when you put a 50 times multiplier on something, expect the gaps to widen even more as time goes on, until you're literally making characters grow millions or billions of times stronger in just a short time. Don't believe me? Go and ask Golden Frieza in Resurrection F. But at the end of the day, despite everything I've just said, damn, do I love the original Super Saiyan. What a legendary concept. And without a shadow of a doubt, the most popular concept in Dragon Ball history. If someone came up to me and said, Dragon Ball Z, 2 things come to my mind. Goku and Super Saiyan. And to put Super Saiyan that close to Goku's name goes to show why Super Saiyan is ridiculous. Thank you, Super Saiyan. Thank you, Akira Toriyama. And thank you, Krillin. Because without you popping, we wouldn't have got the Super Saiyan bargain sale.